Coastal erosion was my biggest issue. When I started fishing in Buras, junior high, high school, started working for Ryan Lambert in mid-90s, and I just watched that whole place wash away, which is so disheartening. And we kept having high rivers, and just there was so many factors. But I remember the day I was fishing in a place called Spoonbill Island. I was fishing with 3 old men that had fished with me for 17, 18 years. And it was a chain of islands that, you know, was huge when I first started fishing there, and now there's hardly anything left. And there were 13 boats in a circle around it. And that old man asked me, he says, Lord, he said, where are we gonna fish in 2 years? And it really kind of set my mind in motion, realizing that I need to make a change. And I'm a river fisherman, and I just moved to the west to the Chafalaya River. And you know, there's a lot to offer here. And the fishery is the same as Buras was when I was a kid. You know, we have so much marsh here, whereas over there we lost so much marsh. So it's been a great change. The fishery is very consistent. You know, we have a lot of structure to fish on calm days. And when it's windy, we have just endless marsh to fish reds and trout in the spring and the fall and the winter. So very happy with what I did.
Coming up,
we're back at Whiskey Island. It's one of the largest coastal restoration projects in Louisiana history. This entire island was rebuilt from about 2017 to about late 2018, using about $120 million in oil spill penalty monies. And since, it's become just an excellent place. It was a great place to trout fish before, but it's become really a great place for folks to come out here. The cool thing about Whiskey Island here in Terrebonne Parish is that the marsh, unlike some of the other islands that are east of here, the marsh comes almost all the way up to the backside of this island. And this is the front line of defense for protecting all of that interior marsh that's so popular for sportsmen up around Dulac, Dularge, and everything in western Terrebonne. It's really an important project to keep the integrity of Terrebonne Parish together.
Louisiana's barrier islands are unique coastal habitat and our first line of defense for hurricanes. In the early 1900s, President Theodore Roosevelt fell in love with Louisiana. Footage here shows his visit to one of Louisiana's barrier islands, where he's seen admiring the wide variety of birds. Roosevelt wrote, "To lose the chance to see frigate birds soaring in circles above the storm, or a file of pelicans winging their way homeward across the crimson afterglow of sunset, is like the loss of a gallery of the masterpieces of the artists of old time." Today, modeled after the footsteps of America's 26th president, the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership advocates for restoration efforts that benefit outdoorsmen and women.
But you know, Theodore Roosevelt had a very strong connection to Louisiana. He came down here to hunt. Anybody who's familiar with the sulfur mine over by Catfish Lake out of Golden Meadow, you know, is familiar with Bully Camp Lake. That was named after Theodore Roosevelt. You know, we model our organization after his mission. He was one of the great conservationists, one of the great outdoorsmen, statesmen in our country, brought a lot of folks together to work on conserving hunting and fishing opportunities and habitat. And so we model our organization after, you know, the mission that he set out.
On a previous episode of Bayou TV, we learned of Louisiana's effort to turn restitution money from the BP oil spill into rebuilding a popular fishing location near Grand Isle.
The restoration of the Caminada headlands of Fouchon and Elmer's Island, you know, it's very important. It provides protection to the only road that comes in and out of Grand Isle. It provides protection to the camps and the homes that are on the mainland of the island. But the other thing is it protects the largest offshore oil and gas port in the world, you know, which is the port of Fouchon. And so without that protection, those areas just become more and more vulnerable to storms and to hurricanes.
In a similar endeavor, projects along the Terrebonne Basin area are focused on rapidly restoring what has been lost.
This little island that we're fishing, it's right up against a big sandbar. It's all washed away. Water's about 3 feet deep right in front of these dead mangrove bushes, and you can see the currents coming ripping around here right now. The water's a little stained, but there is a ton of bait and there's big fish and stuff blowing all up in it. I like to hold off right on the edge of this bar, and it comes up. You can see those guys wade fishing, and they're actually catching fish behind us.
So the big focus since the oil spill, and even before the oil spill to a certain extent, was restoring barrier islands in Louisiana. So from the mouth of the Mississippi River all the way through Raccoon Point, which is the westernmost island in Terrebonne Parish, the state has put forth a lot of effort in investing oil spill money and other revenues in rebuilding those barrier islands.
These newly restored islands also serve as great fishing spots.
You can ask my wife, I spend endless hours looking on Google Earth. Still today, I'm on my 3rd summer here. I'll still lay in bed and I pull up the maps, and I'm looking at satellite imagery. And the cool thing is you can go back and I look at some of the older stuff and I go, wow, that's why those fish are holding on the end of that island, because that island went another mile out there. That's why those sandbars are out there. Fishing's a puzzle, so I just kind of put the puzzle together. A good fisherman can go fish basically anywhere and catch fish. A lot of these, once I learned my way around, and the cool thing was my son and I learned it together. We started coming over here on days off and really started putting a plan together and learning where to fish and where not to fish. Most of these lakes are around, so if we caught fish on the north side and we got here and the wind was different, I just went to the other side and kind of looked for the same thing where I was catching fish.
Throughout Louisiana's history, we've faced continued pressure from hurricanes and land loss, but it's the character of the people who have kept our home alive. In his book, Louisiana Pastimes, Dr. Terry Jones writes on the accounts of one of Louisiana's most dismaying natural disasters, the last days of Last Island. Once a resort location during the early days of statehood, Isle de Nere was ravished by a Category 4 hurricane in 1856, killing nearly 200 people and washing away a then-standing luxury hotel. Survivor account states men, women, and children were seen running in every direction in search of some means of salvation. The entire island had been swept clean, and there was no trace of the Tradewind Hotel or the 100 or so houses. Not one was left.
So we made a quick little run from Whiskey over to the next island to the east. This is called Last Island or Trinity Island. And all of this used to be one giant barrier island. It all used to be called Ile de Nere or Last Island. It used to be 22 miles long. It was the biggest barrier island in Louisiana. And over the last century, it got cut to pieces by hurricanes.
Recent natural events remind us of the responsibility we have to work together in keeping our Louisiana home intact.
Every one of the islands from the mouth of the Mississippi River all the way through the Terrebonne Basin either has been restored in the last 15 years or will be restored over the next decade. And again, restoring all these barrier islands is critical because it protects the communities to the north, it protects that sensitive marsh. But without the investment of restoring these islands over the last 3 decades, most of these barrier islands would have washed away for good. There would be no more islands to fish. So it's critical to come out here and pump the sediment. They're pulling the sand from an offshore sand site, an ancient headland of the Mississippi River called Ship Shoal. They're bringing it up here in barges and they're pumping it out onto these beaches and shaping it and then building marsh in behind them.
Right now you're seeing an enormous amount of work. You're seeing, projects that are 80 million, 100 million, 120 million, even 250 million plus projects because the money's available. And instead of the piecemeal approach that the state was taking prior to getting those oil spill dollars, where they were building a few acres here and a few acres there, now they've got the money to go out and make some really big investments on restoring an entire island or an entire beach headland at one time.
I find a lot of guys in my industry, we get caught up in that, man, we got to get out there, get our limit as fast as we can, get back in before the sun comes up, it gets hot. People don't necessarily want to do that drive 8 hours from Dallas to come fishing. They want to experience it all. They want to ride through the marsh. They want to see alligators. They want to see the pelicans. They want to experience everything we have to offer. And the parish is really helping out the fishing industry because they realize the amount of tourism dollars that it generates.